Only 45% of high school students
Welcome everyone. I am going to find my camera so I can show you my face. We are so glad that you are joining us today. So excited to be here with you all today. My name is Dawn Samples, and I am the director for Avant Learning. As you guys are coming in, we still have a lot of people joining us. Please introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what you do, where you teach or where you work, and just throw that into the chat so we can kind of have some collaboration and chat going on in the chat today, also online. So if you are on social media, please be sure to use the hashtag DLI WL is lit, LIT, so that we can share our learning with others who are maybe joining us just through social media today. I am so excited today for our webinar. Today's webinar is Developing Language and Literacy for Lifelong Learning in DLI, Dual Language Immersion, and World Language Contexts. So it's going to be a wonderful day. I think. How many people do we have right now? Let me see. We're up to 50 people right now. I am going to go ahead and get started. If you guys have questions or there's anything that you need to ask our presenters today, please make good use of the chat, because we're all going to be looking at that and monitoring that as we go through our session today. Okay. So just a few housekeeping things before we launch into our learning and I introduce our moderators and our presenters. I want to make sure everyone here knows that you will be able to access a certificate of attendance for today. You're going to be able to access a link to the slide deck. You'll get a PDF of our chat session here today. So if you guys have good ideas, share them out, good links to share, put that in the chat, because that way you'll have access to that afterwards. And you also will have a survey at the end of today's webinar that will give you a link at the end so that you can download your certificate of attendance. So that's the way that you can access that certificate. So it's important to please give us feedback on your experience today, and you'll have access to that. You'll also get an email tomorrow from me where you'll be able to access those things all together in one location tomorrow. Okay, I want to make sure too, as you are tweeting or out there on social media, make sure you're following us. In just a minute after we get started, I will be pasting all of these. Actually, you know what? Let me do that right now so I don't forget. I'm going to put all of these in the chat for you all so that you will be able to. Did they show up for you? Not yet. There we go. There. So you guys can just click on those and follow and join along in the virtual world. All right, let's get started. Today, I would like to introduce our moderators and collaborators with us today for this webinar. Avant More Learning is super excited to collaborate with the Delaware Department of Education and the Delaware State Language Organization, DECTFL. We have with us today Lynn Fulton, who is a specialist for dual language immersion in Delaware, and we're super excited for Lynn to be here and helping moderate. She'll be talking to you in the chat and talking to you online. Also, we have the current president of DECTFL, Holly Schnitger, and Vinny Civarelli, who is the vice president of DECTFL, and their contact information is there for you also. And they are also going to be joining us and talking with us throughout the webinar today. So welcome, you guys. We're so glad that you're here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce our presenters today. Our first presenter today is Ryan Allen from Del Mar High School. He's the Spanish teacher and department chair, and he's going to be presenting information about getting early literacy skills off the ground with your language learners. Our second presenter today is Shui Qin, who is a Chinese immersion teacher, and she is going to talk to us about moving students from that early level, moving them up and leveling them up, powering them up into higher levels of literacy. And our third presenter today is Antonio Amores Ortiz, who is also an immersion teacher who teaches some secondary level immersion students. And he's going to talk to us about those higher levels, keeping that challenge and developing literacy at the higher levels. We have 3 essential questions for today that we are going to be addressing through these presentations. The first one is, how does second language literacy develop in a 90% plus language learning scenario or classroom where the language is used at least 90% of the time, maybe in a world language classroom, or 100% of the time in a dual language immersion classroom. How does literacy develop in the initial stages, and how does literacy expand at later stages? So without further ado, I am going to pass the mouse off to our first presenter. So Ryan, you now are in control. You can drive, and I am going to disappear for a moment and let Ryan come on board with everyone. Okay, Ryan, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And good evening to everybody. Like mentioned, my name is Ryan Allen. I am a high school teacher at Delaware High School. I specialize in the novice level classrooms. And as a Spanish teacher for about 10 years, one of the most common things that I hear when people learn that I'm a Spanish teacher is that despite having taken a language for 4 years throughout high school, they grow up and they stop using the language, and over time they simply do not remember it enough to be able to have a conversation. And I've been hearing that throughout my career, and even before I had become a Spanish teacher. So I'd always thought, okay, why is this happening? Why are these people, sitting in the classroom for so long and then not getting enough out of it? And so I'm going to share with you a couple of strategies and thoughts that I've had, as well as dive into a little bit of research that I had the opportunity to take a look at recently. We know that about 18% of US citizens are able to speak a second language. And because of that, they're missing out on the cognitive, social, cultural and economic benefits that come along with language learning. And let's see here. I'm trying to click forward, Don, but it's not cooperating with me. There we go. So for me, when I think about what an early language learning classroom should look like, I equate proficiency with performance. The world language classroom is more like a band or a chorus classroom than like a math or a science room. Of course, we have the knowledge-based skills that math and science would have, but again, it's more like that performance. And one of my biggest influences when it comes to conceptualizing world language instruction is not a linguist, but rather a musician. There's a guy by the name of Victor Wooten. He is a Grammy Award-winning bass guitar player. He's played with a number of bands and session kind of settings. And some of what he says about music as a language really applies to second language learning as well. For example, when we think about when we learned our first language, we didn't just practice it a few times a week. We were immersed in it for days on end, for months on end, before we started to produce any kind of output. And as children, as babies, we were given opportunities to jam, as he calls it, in improvised settings, using what we know to create the sort of pre-language. We know that learners negotiate meaning in a variety of often unpredictable ways, and we need to be aware of that in the classroom. Oftentimes you look at classrooms and teachers want to have sort of an organized setting, but language learning just isn't that organized all the time. And we need to be aware that these students are going to be picking things up at different rates, using them differently. We need to be able to give our students a chance to make mistakes. We know that when we try to correct them too often, then they become afraid of making mistakes. And that's one of the worst things that we can do when we're trying to build proficiency. We should give them enough input so that they have something interesting to say. But then we need to get out of their way and let them say what they want to say, not necessarily what they think that they are supposed to say. So going back to that kind of idea of the jam session in the classroom, we need to give them opportunities to improvise, to make mistakes, and to have fun with the language, play around with the language. But we need to give them some sort of goal while they are jamming. And that goal should be the proficiency benchmarks. And I want to give a quick shout out to the Avant advanced proficiency modules. I worked on these last week with my department, and we did a fantastic job kind of collaborating on going through these modules. And they do a great job of breaking down the difference between the novice mid, the novice high. You know, what's the floor for the novice high level? How is the novice high level different than the intermediate low level? These modules are fantastic to give teachers the information about the different proficiency levels, but it's even better for us to teach these proficiency levels to our students so that they can use them to self-assess. And also importantly, they can use them for peer review purposes. We know that when students correct other students' work, they see gains in their proficiency because of it. It kind of goes back to that adage of the best way to learn something is to teach it. When it comes to, again, that idea of jamming in the classroom, the idea of circumlocution is very beneficial to touch on early and often, especially at the Spanish 1 level, where students don't know a whole lot of words. If we can try to teach them to talk around what they don't know, then they find themselves in fewer situations, getting lost in the language, getting frustrated. And I often tell my Spanish 1 students, hey folks, there's a whole lot of Spanish that you do not know yet. So use what you do know. I'm not interested in what you don't know. I'm interested in you coming up with creative ways of using what you do know. And oftentimes when I'm talking to a Spanish student, especially in a testing situation where they know that their grade is on the line, they'll come across a word that they don't know in Spanish and their mind goes blank. And I'm sure this happens with all of your students as well. All they can think about in that instance is that one word that they're trying to think of, but they can't remember. So I have a pretty good strategy that I share with them. And we actually kind of train with it. I drill with them conversational practice that when they come across something that they don't remember how to say, this is their go-to phrase. No sé pero. I don't know, but. And they can use this phrase to sort of switch gears. They run into a wall, they use this no sé pero to kind of dig a tunnel under the wall to use something that they do know how to say instead. So talking a little bit to how we support our struggling students, especially this year when things have been remote and I have students coming to me who didn't do very much the first semester and are now trying to get caught up with the rest of the class so that everybody can move forward. Some scaffolding and support strategies that I like to use. First off, I have a very regimented curriculum. And I have a series of vocab sheets that are numbered, and I've developed these vocab sheets over the past 10 years with quite a bit of student input. I've noticed which words students are using, which words students don't use. I've kind of rearranged things throughout the years, trying to set it up in a fashion that is going to build upon itself, that makes sense, and trying to reconcile both what the students want to be able to say with things that I think that they should also know as we go along. In addition to this, I have students maintain organized binders, and I ask them to all have their binders organized uniformly across the room. I want student in seat A to have the same exact binder as the student in seat B. That way they can help one another find vocab. I often tell them it's just as important as knowing what the word is in Spanish is knowing where to find that word in your binder. If I can tell them, all right, look on the front of Vocabulario dos when you're looking for numbers, on the back of Vocabulario cinco, we have all of our occupation words. So it makes it easy for them to find their vocab. And over time, they need to look at their vocab less and less as they get it stored up in their memory. Here's a couple examples of some vocabulario. This year especially, I've gotten into having them illustrate more of their vocab just to make these picture dictionaries. The photo on the left here is a student who he used his classroom vocab to illustrate Professor McGonagall's classroom from Harry Potter. So anytime you can get the students using the words from the vocab list in creative ways like this to help their memory, using the pictures, because we know that the human brain works best with images. It's good to go, word to word, but it's even better if you can connect the picture to an image. Around the classroom, I have these word walls where I really try to highlight the complex transition words and interrogatives, reminding students that they should always be thinking about ways to elaborate on their sentences. I find that if we kind of highlight these elaboration techniques, then the rest of the vocab falls into the place. The vocab that's more concrete, if you will, kind of falls in line once they start thinking about these next level techniques. One strategy that I came across recently in some research is the idea of visual thinking strategies. And what this is taking target culture artwork and kind of making it a focus in the classroom. Of course, you'll want to select artwork that is both thematically appropriate and level appropriate. You know what vocab your students know, so take a look at what artwork there is. And something that I do in the novice level classroom is, early on, I'll just even find pictures of characters, cartoons, put some names on them, and then that way we can describe what the characters are doing, what they look like, and so on. Specifically, the technique that they use in the research is, again, they pick some target culture art. They ask the student to simply look at the painting or at the sculpture for 1 minute. They have a 10-minute class discussion where the teacher kind of asks these probing questions. What's going on? What do you see? What else can you find? In an early classroom, you can talk about the colors and the shapes, the emotions that people are displaying in the picture. After that 10-minute discussion, you give the students 5 minutes to write. And what the researchers found is that the speaking and the writing kind of work together. And when you use them both, the researchers found that the students produced an increase in word count as well as words per sentence. The researchers noticed an increase in errors, but that's to be expected, because we know that as we see an increase in complexity, we're also going to see an increase in errors. Another strategy that is very prevalent in the research right now is the idea of digital storytelling. And I really like the idea of digital storytelling for a few reasons. A, it gets the students, it gets their creative juices flowing. And more importantly, it gets them using the technology, both hardware and software, that they are already using. Most of our students, at least the majority of students in my school, have smartphones. So they have access to Wi-Fi, they have access to all sorts of different apps. We have a lot of students who are aspiring YouTubers. That seems to be like the new basketball player that all students aspire to be. And so if you have students that are already using YouTube, already using Twitch for video games, we have a lot of students already creating videos with apps like TikTok. Get them using whatever it is that they're using. Recently, I found a really cool website that I want to share. It's called storyboardthat.com. And this is a storyboard that I created in about 10-15 minutes just because I was playing around with the website. I haven't gotten a chance to use it with my students yet, but I'm really looking forward to do so, to see what kinds of things that they can create. But it's free. It's got a lot of really good tools, especially for a free website. Again, storyboardthat.com. So this brings me back to the question of, what do we do to increase proficiency? How do we get more than simply 18% of United States citizens fluent in multiple languages? And I noticed that despite all of the strategies, despite the scaffolding, despite the organization, despite having Spanish 2 students test at the, I believe I've had students test up to the intermediate mid-level by the end of Spanish 2, a lot of them decide not to take Spanish 3. We have over a 50% drop off from Spanish 2 to Spanish 3. Spanish 2 is required in Delaware, Spanish 3 is not. And I know that this is not unique to my situation. We know that at the university level, we see the same thing. Students are taking the required courses, and then only a fraction of them are taking the upper level courses. So what is it that we do? Not a lot of research examines why students choose not to enroll in world language courses. There's some research that does take a look at bilinguals who are well into their adulthood and how they perceive their bilingualism. So there might be a little bit that we can go off of from that research. For example, I read a study recently where Coffee and Street examined language learners' meta-narratives, which is to say they examine not only what the participants tell in their autobiographical stories, but how they tell them as well. And there's a few themes that sort of come from how these people perceive their bilingualism. One of them, one of the participants said that she's a chameleon. Because of her language learning, she's able to blend in across a variety of cultures. That same participant had said that she should probably be an actress because she feels like she's taking on roles in her second language and creating identities that have more freedom than her L1 identity. Her L1 identity is boring. Her L1 identity goes to work and pays the bills, while her L2 identity gets to have fun. And another participant talked about how he felt like an adventurer because of his language learning. He was escaping the mundane in order to explore these new and more interesting worlds. So I think that going forward, more research needs to be done on examining how adult bilinguals perceive their bilingualism and find out, exactly how their bilingualism has shaped their identity and helped them throughout life. And we can use that research to try to build a framework that will hopefully guide instruction and keep more students interested and engaged in world language classes. So on that note, muchas gracias. Thank you again for having me. Thanks to DECFL and thank you to Avant. And like you all, I'm very excited to hear about dual language immersion because it addresses a lot of the issues that we find in the traditional world language classroom. So thank you again and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ryan. That was wonderful. We are going to check in with some of our moderators now. So Holly and Lynn and Vinny, what are some things that you're seeing people share out there in the Twitter world and in our own chat? What are some ideas or things that people have shared or that are showing interest in? I don't know, Lynn, do you want to start? You want to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. So there is a lot of conversation around the topic of using art in the L2 classroom, and some questions around, if novice learners only know colors, would they use English? One of the things in my experience was always that it's important to give kids the opportunity to use whatever language they have and to just kind of create those things. In a world language classroom, when you're 90% plus, absolutely capitalize on that limited amount of English to maybe talk about the culture, but then also build in some of that cultural vocabulary.
Thank you, Lynn. Vinny, how are things out there in the Twitter world?
Hello from the Twitterverse. Yes, I'm here. And I would just echo what Lynn said. There's a lot of great conversation about how to use art. I couldn't resist posting something about that wonderful image from Diego Rivera. And I really think that there is an opportunity to talk about art at any level, as Ryan mentioned. And like Lynn mentioned, use that 10% wisely. To allow kids to express how they feel about art, but also in our Twitter feed, we've had a great amount of information about word walls and rejoinder posters. And that's a great way to bring the students back to using the target language if you give them that little bit of time to use English to express how they feel. So that's really awesome going on in the Twitter feed right now.
Thank you, Vinny. I know there's so many great ideas that Ryan shared with us. And I know he mentioned several resources. And Ryan, I may tap you later to see if I can catch some of those links to put into some of the documents we send out to folks tomorrow, because I know some of you may be asking about those. But also you guys that are tweeting or are in the chat, feel free to share resources and ideas that you have too that you would want to share back with Ryan to give him ideas as well for things as a thank you for all the great ideas that he shared to us too. So we are going to keep moving on. I'm going to pass the baton to our next presenter. So Chin, I am about to give you the mouse so you can take over and do your presentation. And we will check back in with everyone again in a few minutes. So here you go, my friend, you have it.
Just checking on the bottom, see. Oh, okay, it's come up. Okay, 你好, 晚上好. Hello, everyone. So this is Qin. I'm Chinese immersion teacher, work in the state of Delaware, and I have taught 8 years. I taught 5 years of first grade Chinese immersion, and this is my 3rd year in 5th grade Chinese immersion. So first, this is just a quick review of the proficiency characteristics in the Delaware student immersion programs. And here you can see where our students in 1st grade started at novice level, and then they move all the way up to intermediate level in 5th grade. Today, I'm going to share the scaffolding strategies we have applied in the classroom in our elementary levels. And we are going to go through 4 main categories here. I label them as supports. So hopefully this will be helpful to support your classroom or your programs. So the first main category is the sensory supports. We use a lot of visual representations, physical movements, music, and songs. And for the little ones in 1st grade, the songs and the chants are really helpful to build that classroom language and routines, and also just simple vocabulary you have to introduce. Here on the right, we have a picture of how we introduce the 4 tones in Chinese. When the students speak Chinese, if they are not speaking the right tones, the character can mean different meanings. So it's really important they know, aware of the different tones. So here we have the image showing how when you speak Chinese, the tones are just like the cars moving on the road. So when you start the 1st tone, if you are saying a word in the 1st tone, the car is just kind of steady on the street. And then when you are speaking in the 2nd tone, it kind of goes up, rise, and then 3rd tone is fall and then rise up again. So when we are practicing the tones, we also encourage students to have their hands out and kind of move like a car going on the streets. And here we have another example showing how we continue to use physical movements and also visual representation in the upper grade levels. Here it's in the science class. We also teach in Chinese. We introduce the molecules of a solid, liquid, and gas. So we have the picture here to show the students how the molecules are moved. And also here with physical movements, when the student put their hands on the shoulders, it's showing the students how the molecules are kind of tightly compact in the solid. And when they stretch out their arms, it's how the molecules move rapidly inside of the gas. So here we continue to use visual representation when we are creating and also utilizing our word wall in the immersion classrooms. As we all know, for Chinese words, they are characters, they are pictographs. So it is hard for the student to make that connection with their native or first language. So here we start with divide the classroom into different parts. So actually we have more than one word walls in the classroom. The first word wall, we start with pictographic characters, where the students can see the character as here in the black, that's the original character. And down here, that's a pictographic representation of the meaning of that character. So it helps students to build that connection to interpret the meaning of the character. And then the second wall is where the radicals wall. So in Chinese, we try to teach students there are parts of the character. And if they learn the parts, they are able to interpret the meaning of the characters. So here we call them radical house. So on the top triangle, it shows that special part. We call it radicals. So this radical, the 3 dots, it means something to do with water. So down here in the orange box, any characters falls in this radical house means the meaning of that character has something to do with water. So that's how to make more deep connection in terms of understanding the meaning of the characters. And then at last, we move to the real word wall where we have just the characters. But as you can see here, visual representation play a really important role in terms of understanding, recognize, and be able to use a character to create sentences in a long run. So next we continue with using the word wall in the upper elementary. Here where students already know the parts of the characters, they know the meanings from the pictographs, so they move on to build parts of the speech. So as you can see here in a 5th grade Chinese immersion classroom, we are dividing the word wall into parts of speech, color-coded, so with adjective, verb, noun, pronoun, and other parts. At this level, students are taking the ownership of using the word wall. So while they are reading or learning in the Chinese immersion classroom, if they see any characters or phrase that fall into one of the category, they are able to write that words or the phrase on sticky notes and put it under that part of the speech. So they are using the word wall in their small group to be able to create their sentences, come up with paragraphs, or just using them to play a game. They can take this out from the wall since they are all have Velcro on the back. The next main category we have here is graphical supports. So we use a lot of graphic organizer charts and graphs. Here on the right is an example from a 1st grade math class. So the students use graphic organizer to do math problems in Chinese with the sentences, basic sentence structures, and also vocabulary they learned. They learn about more or less and how to compare. They are able to write out their own word problems for math class in Chinese. And after they write their own word problems, they are able to solve the problem in different ways by using the graphic organizer. Later in the small group, they share their problem with other friends and be able to have more meaningful conversation in the math content. Next, we continue to use more charts and graph in the lower elementary. So on the left, we have sentence patterning chart. The students use this chart. They can use it, the teacher can use it to introduce the new vocabulary, the parts of speech, and the students can later use this, utilize them in small groups to create a more meaningful conversation and come up with writing. So here we color-coded part of the speech, and the students are able to create sentences by themselves. So here, one of the example on the first row, it says, in the evening, I eat popcorn at home. So the color-coded part shows where the student put a verb, put a noun, put a pronoun. So it's really helpful. And also it encourages students to be more creative with utilizing the target language in the classroom. And here on the right, we have the pictorial input chart. This chart really boosts the students' engagement, and also it's maximized brain imprinting along with academic language. Here, the teacher can also introduce simple sentence structures and also really support reading comprehension. So the picture here is showing the students learned, we learned a lesson about the water cycle. So students are able to use the characters here, be able to create sentences to describe where the water goes in the water cycle. And later in the small group, they are able to take out all these flashcards and try to put them back into the right place and be able to come up sentences to retell the stories they have learned. In the upper elementary, as we move on, the students already know the basic sentence structures with a lot of different categories of vocabulary. They are able to produce more sentences and even paragraphs and essays. So here on the left, we have the process grid, which is a really nice tool to use if you want to encourage your student to come up with expository writing. So students do their research and they put the information into categories. So here in the middle, it's an example of the students wrote about a particular architecture exists in Thailand. So here on the left, the student collect information from the process grid about what materials they use to build this kind of house, what the functions, and what are the climates in that country where this main architecture style is located, and also the countries and the names of that architecture. On the right here, we have another pictorial input chart. As you can see here, compared to the lower grades, students are able to produce more vocabulary and be able to search and provide more information to talk about the igloo. And here, the next strategy we're going to share its interactive supports, where I'm going to share websites and the software I use a lot to encourage that turn and talk and also think, pair, share. So on the right here, it's a virtual escape room I have used for upper grade students. And you can create it with Google Slides and Forms. This is really a good tool to actually improve listening, speaking, writing, and reading, all of the components we have to cover as a language teacher. And here, as you can see, students enter this room, they start to click things, and they have to work in groups. And they can work in breakout rooms in Zoom, or if you are in the real classroom, you can also break up them into small groups. Once they get into the Google Forms here with a smaller picture, the nice feature of the Google Form is in for students, they have to answer in complete sentence. And if they do not answer, they are not able to pass to the next level in order to win in this escape room. So it's a really powerful tool I have used. And continue, we also use Jamboard and Google Docs. So for Jamboard, this is also really good collaborative tool. Students can work together and communicate and also to improve their reading comprehension. So here in both lower and upper grades, teachers can take images from their textbooks or any books, lessons they have learned, and the students have to put the story in the correct order. So for lower grades, students should be able to give basic vocabulary or short phrase to describe. In upper grades, students are able to type out sentences or even paragraphs, if they are capable, to describe what happened in the story. So it's also to improve their ability to retell the stories. And here on the right is an example of students working in small groups to come up with their own expository writing about animals. As you can see here, with the other scaffolding strategies we have implemented in the past, at this stage, students are able to collaborate together to come up their own writing pieces. So the last main category I'm going to share today is verbal and textual. So here we use a lot of sentence starters, questioning prompts, cues, guiding questions, and labeling to improve students' reading comprehension and overall improve their literacy development. So as you can see here on the right, Each student have a bag with certain colors of highlighters. They use it to fill a graphic organizer when they are reading a book in Chinese. So here, the pink highlighter they have to use to highlight any important key characters have appeared in the book. And then they use a yellow highlighter to highlight any main location or places they have noticed in the story they read. And then blue is for time, and green is for the main events that they saw in the book when they read it. And on the bottom, students have to give a summary of the book. And in the middle, they have to tell the name of the book, the name of the author, and then the name of the illustrator if there is one available. Here in the middle, the smaller picture, that is the sentence starters and also questioning prompts we provide to students so they can have meaningful conversation, authentic conversation, not only in Chinese literature class, but also in science and math class, since we also teach both, all the subjects in Chinese. The last couple websites I want to share are Charlala and Flipgrid. So Flipgrid, students are able to record videos, and they can also share later, and they can have discussion, and students can vote and also talk about what are some of the things they learn from their peers. And Charlala also has the feature like Flipgrid, but one of the nice feature I like about Charlala is they have a draw room. So in the draw room, a teacher can assign different topics. After a teacher assign the topic, students have to draw out whatever the teacher asks and then submit. Once the students all submit their drawing to the teacher are able to share with all the students. And while students are drawing, a teacher can set a timer how long they want the student to draw. Start from this point, that's where the inspiration of all the authentic conversation come up. The teacher can ask, which one do you think is the best drawing here? Or which sports do you like more? Do you like football more than lacrosse? Or do you like lacrosse more than football? Or why do you think this is the best art piece we have today? So as you can see from the drawing here, you can have a lot of conversation come up from students. And also you can use this for sketching in sequence, where you can have story retelling to ask the student to draw different parts of the events happening in the book, and then have a retelling activity to improve that reading comprehension. So that's all I have shared today, and hopefully you'll find something helpful and support your students' language learning in the long term. Thank you, 谢谢.
Thank you so much, Chen. Oh my goodness, so many ideas. That was a lot of great, very authentic examples. Let's go to our people out in the field. Lynn, Vinny, Holly, what are some things you guys are seeing that people are sharing out in the Twitterverse, Vinny, and in chat? Lynn, Holly?
Right now, everyone's talking about Jamboard. How are we using Jamboard in our world language classrooms? It's been a great tool that kind of snuck in on us in Google, and it sounds like a lot of people are using that to get live interaction with their students, whether they're remote or they're in person or hybrid. So my question on Twitter I have for people right now is, how are you using Jamboard in your world language classrooms?
Yes, please share. I've seen so many really creative ways that people have been using Jamboard. It's such a great collaborative tool. I would love to hear more about ways people are using it to get students to collaborate asynchronously, synchronously. So many just amazing things that you can do with that. Lynn and Holly, what are some things that you guys have seen either in Twitter or in the chat that you, or any questions for Chen that you may want to bring up?
Hi guys.
So I think Jamboard is definitely part that keeps getting brought up in the chat. So exactly what Vinny is seeing on Twitter, and just how it's such a great opportunity for students to work in groups in this very unique setting this year. Also, just the importance of modeling and repetition that Chin really showed us really nicely. And the teaching them to use all of their senses when learning the language so they can gather meaning that way. And also just, I think just seeing a high school Spanish classroom and a Chinese immersion elementary school showing that good practices, best practices are best practices regardless of the age and the level of the student. We're seeing a lot of overlap between the two presenters so far.
Absolutely. I think that if nothing else this year, I think a lot of teachers, we've learned that sticking to those core practices, no matter what kind of environment you're living in and what level you teach, is important. I was especially impressed with so many scaffolding strategies that Chin presented and how to scaffold language and literacy. That was just awesome. So we are now moving on to our last presenter of the day. Good gracious, this hour is just flying by. Antonio Ortiz, I am going to share my mouse with you so that you can take over the screen, and we will hear from Antonio about secondary. Whoops, I hit it for you. There you go. There you go.
Thank you, Dan. I'm a Spanish immersion and social studies teacher. So my social studies, to understand, my social studies are completely in Spanish. This is my third year in Delaware as an immersion teacher, but I was an ELL elementary paraprofessional in Indiana. I was a Spanish instructor in Arkansas State University. So this background helped me to understand the different proficiency levels that a student can have, especially in my classrooms. So let me see if I can have control. So Ryan Chin explained how does literacy develop in the previously stages, showing fabulous strategies and techniques. I will explain more how to literacy expand in later stages. For that, you probably see like the taxonomy, the Bloom's taxonomy. So it's something familiar for you. And I will explain some of the techniques that I use in my classroom, especially today that we have the Zoom classes all the time. And so it's some of the techniques you can use it in classroom physically, but also with the Zoom. And something that probably you see is just the how to expand the vocabulary from the previous stages, the Bloom's taxonomy. They have like a remember to create. In my classroom, my majority of the students that I have, I'm very proud of them because they have the Apple test and they have like an advanced level in Apple test. But what they find in the classroom is that we still dealing with the same problem. They don't have the specific vocabulary. They need to understand the historical document, like the primary text and the secondary text that they need to read. When I want them to be able to use that vocabulary to transform the text to put themselves into perspective of the historical figures a moment, because that will use, especially in social studies, all the time, and they very lack on that. So how that I get my students to acquire the vocabulary and use it within the right context nonsense. So you probably say, okay, that's probably, it's a lot. But for me, actually, I found that it was pretty simple. I moved from what we consider like a lower cognitive skills to higher cognitive skills. And to use that, I use the what we previously I mentioned, the Bloom's taxonomy, and constantly recycle the vocabulary that we use in classroom from the different levels. So they really know and can apply and create things with that new words. So I will start to previously what we say like a remember, okay? So the students will remember what we saw in the previous classes. What you see right now is what we use in classroom. The social studies book is the TCI, American United States through the industrialism. So they basically, that's the power of the revolution. So the student will answer the unique question and the question related to the section that we see previously. So that's the question we have. ¿Cómo pudo el ejército continental ganar la guerra? How basically the military won to the British Empire. So the student will remember what we saw in previous classes. For that, this question can be I would recommend it that this question can be answered in like a platform that you can use it. We have Schoology, but many of you can use Google Classroom or different platform like a Canvas. Or they can use it also in the Zoom chat by themselves. Okay, it doesn't have to be graded. It depends what you use it. Depends what day you can change it. Can be graded or not. So we change it now to understand. So previously to read the next section, we need to understand vocabulary, okay? So what you see, the student will understand the pre-reading vocabulary. And one day using the things that I use many times in classroom, that you probably use in classroom is the Quizlet, or Quizlet Live. You can use Kahoot, you can use Jeopardy, you can use many of the applications you have. So the student now is the stage when they will work on the vocabulary using some of these applications. In this case, Quizlet. So they can use it, as you can see, use it like a different groups. They also have this chat to answer. Depends what you have. If you have, in my case, in my classroom, I have like a really, well, I have 3 years with this group. So I have my confidence with this group is very high. But even in the beginning, we still having like the Zoom have open. So you can do it like a open for everybody, or you can have it like a just only privately. They can use it even privately in groups. So they can share the vocabulary. So the next step is what they're using in my classroom is a student will read the topic question section with questions about the reading. So a student will read the topic, but we will read in groups. I read some of the paragraphs and my student will read the others. And the student has certain questions to answer and they read. So as you can see, this is in the Schoology where we have the text. The student will read, I will read probably one paragraph, the student read another paragraph, but we still having some of the questions about the reading. And we read each section by section. So the student have certain questions and answer with what we read. Doesn't have to be like in my case, usually we have like a 3 or 4 or 5 questions about the reading in general. So they need to apply that vocabulary to the reading. So, oops. The next, what I do in my classroom is the student will apply the concept they learn to answer the questions. This is the application user. I do it. Usually these activities can be completed, like they read the topic section, they read the answer, but a student will complete in person group we have like a student notebook. So in this case, it's by TCI, some activities they have it. So they need to apply what they already learned and the reading, but in different concepts they're already running on the reading and different activities they have it. So for example, this activity, it doesn't relate with the American Revolution directly because what you see is 2 groups. Terminación is basically asking like a teacher, a game, but this is basically what happened in the American Revolution. 2 groups, the American military, and they have the British Empire, and they need to apply what they read and the text to understand that can be in different moments in the history, even in different situations, like you see. So that for me was my big thing, my big concern. Like I don't want the students to have it like a very automatic, like the vocabulary they apply directly to fill up the blanks. I want them to really apply to different situations. That really doesn't have the same situation like American Revolution. They don't see here, they don't see like the General George Washington, but actually they see teacher, the professor, which is actually, that's the compared like a George Washington. So they understand now what is the war techniques and what happened in the American Revolution, if they can apply in different times or different situations. And the next steps, what we're doing, this every time that I do it, sometimes it's by different, it's like a little portion, doesn't have to be like a complete. I try to do the same thing every class, but in different, just a small portion. So the student will analyze a part of the document. So I will provide a document referring to the topic they have read. It has to be related, so that what they have read, but not the same text. So even it's related what the topic, this is related for American Revolution, but doesn't have to be from the text, okay? So to do that, actually I'm using, in this case, it's DBQ, it's application. DBQ we're using in, at least on the north of Delaware, but it's application, actually website, dbq.com, you can find it. But you can use different, you can use also to Newsela or videos with puzzles. You can, even the kids, the student actually can be analyze videos. We analyze History Channel video about the American Revolution in Spanish. So in this case, as you can see, it's a text talking about the number of the military die in the war. So different numbers they need to analyze. So they need to see what is they it is a primary document or a secondary document, and actually why. Okay, so they already see a text, but now they apply the skills. They analyze the text, but apply the skills they already learned previously. Oops. And the last part, what I do in my classroom is like the student will write a paragraph with the original idea on the subject. They create, basically, they evaluate the content. Okay, so in this case, I ask my students like, why was necessary the revolution? Why was necessary the revolution and the colonies? So they need to understand that, and they need to create also. They create a question about that. They need to answer that question. And in terms, it's like a more creative. I try to emphasize the idea when doing like a thesis in the future, and in the future that I know in the college, like Ryan explained, college level. In future, the student, they need to create like a thesis. They need to, and they need to answer a problem or answer a question. So the student actually, I try to make sure that usually using the idea that they need to create questions and answer that question. Some of the students, they can have it. I tell you, some students don't have it. I usually also to have another question about that. They need to create, they have to give me the reasons about that. So this is what I'm doing in my classroom. I hope that these techniques can help you for your classes, and anything I will glad to answer. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't get the mouse back from Antonio, so we were all muted for a second. Thank you so much, Antonio. I appreciate so much the ideas that you shared. it's sometimes challenging to think about how you're going to scaffold and build language at those upper levels. So I know I saw a lot of things going on in Twitter. Vinny, do you want to talk to us a little bit about some of the things you saw out in the Twitter world?
Right now, just an incredible amount of energy and conversation about how in which we can get our students to engage. But I love, and I really think this is resonating on social media, how in which Antonio asks his students to put his students in the shoes of other people. And really that's what language learning is. It's putting yourself in the shoes of others and learning about other perspectives. And then more importantly, thinking about how in which you would go and communicate with others because of that. So really exciting what Antonio is getting people thinking about on social media.
It really is. It's really impressive how much and how complex and how deep the language skills grow to be at the middle school and then later high school levels. Lynn and Holly, did you guys see anything you want to talk about or share from the chat?
Yeah, there are a couple of comments here about the choice that Antonio is giving students. And I think that choice is always really important when we're trying to help students continue to develop their language ability. And I loved the focus that Antonio made at the very beginning about vocabulary, right? He cites the fact that a lot of his kids are intermediate high and advanced low level speakers already, and yet they still have a need for vocabulary development. That never ends in language acquisition. And then also people talking a little bit about some of those other resources that are available. So the idea of using Newsela and things like that for additional content area resources and things that are connected to cultural aspects of language that that our secondary world language teachers might use.
I agree. I think sometimes we feel challenged when we're thinking about teaching students at such high levels. And I think Antonio gave us so many good ideas for strategies that he's using to really challenge his learners into those higher levels. I want to thank all three of our presenters. You all did such an incredible job at being able to make this seem like something we can grab hold of and take with us back into classrooms and use. I really appreciate all the amazing graphics and ways you were able to show and exemplify what it is that you've been doing. We do have a couple of questions. Let me see if I can get the. Here we go. Well, it's not going to let me show them. We have two hands raised, but I can't see who you are with your hands raised. It's not letting me. It's not letting me do that. I don't know why. I'm not sure what's going on with the platform today. It's acting really strange. We do have some giveaways. Make sure if you have questions, make sure you put your questions into the chat for any three of our presenters, because we will be able to reach back out to you and respond to any questions that you have. We are going to do some giveaways today. So I am going to ask our Vice President and our President of Textual if, let's see, Vinny, will you choose a number between 1 and 77?
Number 12.
Oh, well, no, you can't. You have to choose another one because you can't tell us what the number is. I'm sorry.
That was the warm up. I was just making sure everyone's paying attention.
That was the warm up. Okay. So if you'll choose a number between 1 and 77, and Holly, you can go ahead and choose a number between 1 and 77 also, and don't tell us what the number is. Okay. And then those of you in the chat who want to get a raffle for, we're going to give away 5 Stamp 4S tests for you as teachers or educators that you can use so that you can take the stamp test and go for the global seal of biliteracy. Be a great way to model your lifelong learning and your own goals for showing your language proficiency. And so we're giving 5 of those away, and Textual is also giving away 3 one-year Textual memberships. So I'm going to ask you, you guys, if you will put your number that you think Vinny or Holly have chosen into the chat. The 5 closest numbers to the number Vinny has chosen will get the 5 stamp tests, and the 3 closest numbers to the number that Holly has chosen will get a deck full membership. So you guys in the chat, throw your numbers in the chat. I see a 12 in there. That's funny. There you go. Okay, I'm going to count down from 5, and then we'll unveil what the numbers are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Vinny, what was your number?
77.
77. Okay. So the 5 closest numbers to 77 will get a stamp for us test. And then Holly, what was your number?
37.
37. Awesome. So the 3 closest numbers to Holly's 37, you guys will get a membership, a 1-year membership to DECFL. Wonderful. Awesome. So what we will do is we will be sending you guys, we'll go through the chat, we'll pull those numbers, and we'll be sending the winners a form for you to fill out for us so that we can get that information to you. Okay. Thank you guys so much for participating in that. And thank you to DECFL for participating in the giveaway with us. I have just a few other things I want to make sure that everyone is aware of before we say goodbye. When you leave the webinar today, a link will pop up for you to do the survey, and you will be able to do the survey and access your certificate of attendance. And tomorrow, everyone will receive an email, and in that email, you will have access to a folder with materials from today's webinar. And if you all have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We also have in the chat today, I think Betty Gehundes, who is the account manager for the DECFL region, for the state of Delaware, but the Northeastern region is also here. So if you guys have any questions for her about anything, she will plug her information into the chat for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to her if you're interested in contacting her about Avant Advanced that Ryan was talking about, or about the Stamp 4S test for yourself or for your learners. Okay. I want to say again, thank you so much, Ryan, Antonio, and Chin. You did an incredible job, and you shared so much information. It's going to take a while for, I think, us to process all the ideas that you shared. And Vinny and Holly and Lynn, thank you so much for partnering with us to be able to offer this webinar today. I really appreciate it. It's been fun working with you guys, and I appreciate all the efforts that this whole team put into putting this webinar together. So thank you guys so much. That is all of our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom.
Bye, you guys. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. This has been an Avant More Learning event. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.